49ers 42. Philadelphia Eagles 19. Niners move to 9-3. Eagles fall to 10-2. A dominant performance by the Niners on the road against the Eagles.
And it started so well for Philadelphia.
Yeah, I gotta admit, I didn't see this one coming. Because I think I picked the Eagles. I was surprised that they were home underdogs here. And the Niners just took it to them.
Yeah.
And there's reasons.
I mean, I thought the 49ers would win. And I thought their punch is better than the Eagles' best punch. I didn't think they would destroy them. Like the start of the game. So play number 1, Philadelphia get a 38-yard slant and run by A.J. Brown. They got a couple of field goals early. They stopped the 49ers early. So it's like, all right, initially, early returns were favorable for Philadelphia, not so much by the 49ers. And then from that point on, the 49ers offense started moving, and then the Eagles didn't stop them for the rest of the game, like at all.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, the Eagles gave some punches back, but it wasn't enough because they couldn't stop. Like every punch they gave, they were getting 2 in return, and you can't win like that.
So I've got tweeted it out earlier, crazy stat of the weekend. The Niners did not attempt a pass longer than 15 yards down the field. 15 was the max. Yet they averaged 11.6 yards per attempt and 16.5 yards per completion without even attempting a pass more than 15 yards down the field. And this is not a negative on Brock Purdy. I'm not using this as a negative. I'm using it as a positive for the totality of this offense. All of it was just unbelievable. I thought Purdy had a few huge plays in there. Again, there was a 3rd and 7 pass to Brandon Ayuk where he hits a far hash deep out to just convert a 3rd and 7. It's like an 8-yard pass, 10-yard, whatever it was. It was far hash, by the way, too, in the NFL. The hash marks matter, not like they do in college, but it matters. And he puts the ball pinpoint, and it was a great job by Ayuk. We always talk, I talk a lot about QB-friendly routes. Great route by Ayuk to come back to it. And then the next play, 48-yarder to Deebo Samuel over the middle. So it was that type of thing, right? The Eagles can't get off the field on 3rd down, or the Niners make a great play on 3rd down. And those were the big plays by Purdy, thrown in with anticipation, accuracy, keeping the drive alive. And then you throw like a little 5-yard pass to Deebo Samuel where he just outruns the whole defense for 48. So look, Brock Purdy's 19 for 27, 314-yard, 4-touchdown, no-pick stat line in isolation is inflated, right? He had Deebo take a 5-yarder, 48. He had Deebo, what was the other? Were they both 48? He had the screen pass for 46, right? Obviously, those are going to make Purdy's stats look better.
68% of his yards came after the catch.
But my point is, Purdy hitting a 3rd and 7 pinpoint pass to Ayuk earned him the right to throw a little, 5-yard pass to Deebo to turn it into 48. That is the stress that the Niners offense puts on defenses. The poor Eagles linebackers. Zach Cunningham hurt. Christian Ellis in there. I think it was his first career start. Nicholas Morrow. They had a rough outing. Trying to cover Deebo Samuel over the middle. Trying to cover Christian McCaffrey on a wheel route, for 33-yarder. Those poor linebackers when you're facing the Shanahan offense. So it was just a masterclass once again by all of them. By Shanahan, by Brock Purdy, and then all the playmakers that the Niners had.
Yeah, I mean, their offense looked, once it got going after that first couple of drives, they were absolutely dominant. And then their defense did enough to ensure the Eagles couldn't keep pace in like an absurd, 40-plus point back-and-forth game.
And even though the Eagles, they controlled the first quarter, they had to settle for 2 field goals. That ended up obviously being huge. They're up only 6-0. And then the Niners come back with 2 touchdowns. They're up 14-6. They get up 21-6. I mean, the Eagles being down 14-6 at the half, it was like, this happens all the time, right? The Eagles have been Jalen Hurts had won, and the Eagles had won how many straight games being down 10?
Yeah, 4.
Maybe more than that.
There was some number. They'd won like 4 straight games from being down at the half or something, and no one had ever made it 5.
So even just being down 10, they had kept winning 5 or 6 in a row with Hurts and the Eagles. But they couldn't make this comeback. They tried. They got it to 21-13. But that was where I think the biggest play of the game was Purdy hitting a 3rd and 7 to Brandon Ayuk, because that the next play was Debo for 48 to put them up 2 scores, and they just ran away with it from there. So yeah, I think in isolation, it's fair to say, did Brock Purdy himself play at a 148.8 passer rating level? I don't think so. But he had a key scramble to keep drives alive. He had the 3rd and 7. He just runs the offense extremely well, gets the ball into Debo and McCaffrey's hands and Kittle, and those guys just make big plays, man.
He was only sacked 3 times, but Jalen Hurts was under pressure 31 dropbacks in this game.
Yeah.
That's insane. That's got to be like the highest figure. I'm going to have to run numbers and find out how long you need to go back before you can find a quarterback that was under pressure more dropbacks than that in a single game. That's a crazy number.
I mean, that was what's
even early in the game, it felt like that, by the way. Like every time you looked up, it's like Jalen Hurts is running around back there under pressure, and then maybe the ball's finding somebody, maybe it isn't, maybe he's running for something, but like he's running around away from 49ers pass rushers, even when they're executing those field goal drives early in the game.
Part of it's just that I feel like all year he's just been kind of like there's some dropbacks where he's just sitting at 9 or 10 yards. He's been doing that all year and almost inviting pressure. And the Niners were trying to compress the pocket and kind of keep him in. And then I don't know, man. It was a good battle. Like Nick Bosa versus Lane Johnson, legit heavyweight battle. Bosa he created some space with bull rushes a few times, got by Lane Johnson a few times. That was a great battle. I mean, there's some really good matchups in this one. But yeah, it did feel like what I kept using the word lethargic for the Eagles offense throughout this season. It just felt like a lot of that just caught up to them. When they'd have like a slow drop back, slow developing plays, and they just hit a downfield pass that just wasn't there in this game, where in previous weeks they were able to hit those and make their comebacks. But Niners did a great job, man, both sides of the ball.
They now have 2 of the most impressive single wins in the season. Like they have absolutely stomped Dallas and now pretty much beat down Philadelphia as well.
This is a nightmare for power rankings.
Yeah.
Because the Eagles are 10-2. They're still a game better than anybody else in the NFL. They're 10-2. But they just got stomped by the Niners on the road. And as you said, the Niners they get the best wins, man. So it's a nightmare for power rankers.
Or the committee.
Or the committee, because you have to battle record, which is the default, with recency bias. I mean, it's a lot to battle here when you're putting power rankings together.
Yeah, I mean, in this world as well, where you're like, MVP, who's the most important player? I mean, the without the Debo Samuel factor is starting to become, like, everyone's saying, is Christian McCaffrey MVP? I mean, is Christian McCaffrey even the most important player that the 49ers have? When they don't have Debo, it doesn't look the same. When they do have Debo, they appear to be unstoppable.
But I said this back when they traded for McCaffrey, right? Like in isolation, it's in our contract, Sam, to be completely against any sort of running back acquisition that involves any sort of value, right? But the point I made at the time was similar to my Jahmyr Gibbs point. This is a bad move if the Niners go out of their way to make sure that Christian McCaffrey has 30 carries and 10 catches every week. It is a great move if Christian McCaffrey becomes the 4th option in this offense behind Debo and Ayuk and Kittle, and then there's McCaffrey. And that fluctuates week to week depending on matchups. And there'll be some games where Christian McCaffrey's uncoverable by opposing linebackers and he's going to have a huge game. And then there's other games, like, again, I say this every single week. Like, it doesn't matter about the stat line. This was a Debo game. You're going to put Debo in space against the Eagles, and they couldn't tackle him. It was a McCaffrey game as well. I mean, they all make this offense tick. It's probably oversimplified to say, when they didn't have Debo and Trent Williams, it all disappeared. But Debo does make defenses play differently. Right? McCaffrey's still a running back first, and he's a running back. And Debo Samuel does make defenses rethink how they align because you don't know where he's going to be. Putting receivers, we said this for years, man, putting receivers into the backfield breaks defenses. Mm-hmm. Debo Samuel has that ability, and it makes the defense think. And that's just another added weapon for Tin Cup, Kyle Shanahan, to put his players in space. So, maybe Debo is the catalyst, but it is just all of those puzzle pieces work together.
I felt like the 49ers just had a better handle on what Philadelphia do than other teams. Like, remember that play, the quarterback draw against Buffalo, where all the Eagles players are like, we couldn't believe the Bills gave us that look because we run this all the time, and that's like the worst possible play to line up against it with, right? Like the Bills went like man coverage, roll the safety away, and Jalen Hurts just had a wide open run. They did exactly the same thing in the similar kind of spot. In the red zone, they ran the same QB draw play, and instead of nobody in that general area, there was like 3 guys all over Jalen Hurts at the line of scrimmage, let alone 5 yards deep into the defense. Like, they were all over that. And for most of the game, they were all over it. Like, the only thing that the 49ers didn't have a tremendously good answer for was the push play, which remains unstoppable.
The Niners won up front, both sides of the ball. We'll also say, remember we said, it's not even English. Before the game, we talked about the Niners' pass blocking grades not being great. They were better in this game, especially against a good Eagles pass rush. The Eagles pass rush has shown, some weakness this year compared to previous years, less dominance, we'll say, compared to previous years. And look, it all just kind of caught up. I also wonder how much the Eagles, in the middle of this schedule, against all these tough games over and over and over again, did they just run out of steam in this one? Because they got Dallas again next week.
Yeah. So how important do you think this game was psychologically for either side? Because this was a game, there was a lot of kind of pre-game talk from both sides, right? The 49ers were pissed off because they got to the NFC title game and then lost all their quarterbacks, and they felt like they got kind of cheated from that game, right? They didn't have a fair shot at actually competing and going to a Super Bowl. The Eagles are like, stop your whinging. This is football. We beat you fair and square. Deal with it, right? And then, so this had been building for a while. Even pre-game, like the 49ers are doing those things of like running through DB drills and stuff, just deliberately provoking the opposition. The kind of thing where when you do it and you win, it's great. He's like, we kind of needled them before the game and we won. Like, we came into your house, pissed all over the carpets, and then won. What are you going to do about it? So the 49ers must feel outstanding. Meanwhile, the Eagles are on the receiving end of that. The 49ers came into their house, disrespected them, and then beat them down and left.
Before we talk about Dom, because we got to talk about Dom, I think the psychological aspect means something. I mean, but at the same time, it's football, and we've seen teams win blowouts and then lose in rematches. Like, we've seen that stuff happen. I think even bigger than this was how many times does Kyle Shanahan have a matchup, and you see that he has a good matchup, and you're like, man, it's a good matchup for Kyle Shanahan. He knows how to exploit this defense. I think we learned that he knows how to exploit this Eagles defense. And the Eagles team building strategy, which I think is a good one, build through the trenches and pass rush and everything, and they kind of neglect linebacker, right? It's kind of an afterthought in the middle of the field. They don't spend a lot on linebackers and safeties.
They're also all hurt.
I get it. But that's also part of their team building strategy as well. So even when Zach Cunningham's out there and their guys are out there, I wonder how much Shanahan's offense, he attacks those lower value positions like crazy and puts them in a bind. I wonder if you want to beat the Niners in the NFC, how much you should actually be trying to invest through the middle where all of the data might say not to. To me, that's what I learned about this game is Shanahan's offense knows how to exploit this Eagles defense. I know they had injuries, but if there's a rematch, I don't think it's the psychological aspect. I don't know if the Eagles are going to have the answers to stop.
Yeah, they might not have. But even Zach Cunningham is like a backup. Like, Nakobe Dean is the guy who's supposed to be manning the middle of this defense, and he's been injured for almost the entire year. Zach Cunningham is a guy who is a very one-dimensional linebacker that was signed as like a backup plan heading into the season anyway. And now he's down, and you're down to the sort of third-string linebacker solution against an offense that deliberately targets linebackers and puts them in a blender anyway. Like, it was a nightmare scenario from that perspective. I don't think, yes, the Eagles deliberately focus less on linebacker than other positions, but when you're focusing less on linebacker and then you're forced into the third string, that's non-workable. Like, that's a complete and total disaster. I think that would be different if they had their intended starters this year.
And then the other thing to touch on before we move on, Dom.
The double ejection.
got ejected, as did Dre Greenlaw.
Yeah. Dom, who apparently is like a cult hero figure in Philadelphia,
Yes.
who I'd never heard of before.
Everybody in Philadelphia apparently
loves Dom.
loves Dom, knows Dom. He's got his own highlight reel. And here's the thing. I saw his highlight reel on Twitter.
Yeah.
And it's not extensive.
Okay.
Right? So the person who put the highlight reel together, it's like, here's Dom, walking out with Nick Sirianni. Here he is talking to somebody. Like, there's not a lot there. And it reminds me a little bit of Nnamdi Asomugha, where there's not a lot of highlights on Nnamdi's tape.
Okay.
Because nobody threw his way.
Yeah.
So nobody goes after Dom. He is the head of security in Philadelphia.
Dom DeSandro. So he's the head of security and something like special advisor to the general manager. Now, that combination just strikes me as quite interesting, right? It feels a lot like, you're in this world of what would a billionaire do, right? You meet a guy like Dom, who knows where, right? And he's my guy. Dom has a certain set of skills that I need on occasion. And so I'm going to put him on the payroll down on the sideline, and he's just going to take care of things,
Yeah. I mean, the Eagles, if you look at their staffing, they have some unique roles. Philly, they're very well staffed up, the coaching staff, and they have people in charge of very specific things, I'll just say. And Dom, as you said, specific set of skills that they take advantage of.
They do.
And he was involved in perhaps getting Dre Greenlaw ejected.
So Dre Greenlaw kind of body slams Devontae Smith to the ground on the sideline. And as tends to happen when that occurs, the Eagles sideline got quite upset and got in Dre Greenlaw's face, and there was some words exchanged. And in the middle of the melee was Dom. And then in reaction to that, Dre Greenlaw sort of throws up his hand pointing at Devontae Smith, but threw it in such a way that it grazed Don's chin. And that was enough to get Dre Greenlaw ejected.
Yeah.
And then apparently they just decided that, Dom's presence in the whole scenario should be enough to get him kicked out of the game as well. So they turfed Dom from the game at the same time, which got him a standing O from the link.
Yes.
Only adding to his cult hero status. But now it sounds like the NFL's reaction to this is going to be, what the hell was Dom doing in this in the first place? We're going to have to punish the Eagles.
My prediction stands from yesterday. I think by the end of the week, we will hear Dom's side of the story, either with pardon my take, or as my followers mentioned, might be McAfee. Somebody's going to get Dom.
That crazy Chargers lady from Sunday night or Monday Night Football or whatever it was on McAfee the next day, I think.
They were working the phones. Now, The Eagles, because he's a special assistant
Dom's
to the
not
GM.
Going to speak out.
Oh, no, he doesn't. He's not going to rat anybody out.
Dom's not a rat. Dom, you
think Dom's
you say nothing.
You think Dom's connected with the DeVito family?
I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying that Dom's not the kind of person that when the phone rings, Dom doesn't answer.
He's got an Italian flag on his security jacket.
That guy's not talking to the media.
He must be torn when they play the Giants in a couple weeks with DeVito.
With Tommy?
Yeah.
There's
got to be some connections there.
I'm kind of fascinated. I mean, we were speculating. This is the reason that I think the league or whatever is going to crack down on this, is that if this is a thing, that your version of Dom on the sideline can just start jawing with the opposition's best players and get them turfed from the game.
Yeah, it's not a great precedent.
I will take the trade, right, of you lose Aaron Donald and I lose Jim from accountancy, right? Call it even. Seems fair to me. I would if I was the Raiders, right? Al Davis would have a whole staff of these people just be like, hey, this guy comes anywhere near the sideline, just run out and boot him in the ass.
You want the get-back coach to double as an instigator.
Yes.
Basically.
Just start fights with the opposing players. You'll both get ejected, and we'll be better off because of that. So I'm sure that's the reason that if a punishment is handed down from on high to Dom, it's because of that. That being said, it does strike me as a kind of... The NFL is weird about how they handle and react to player fights. Nobody is allowed to get involved in this except officials who are not only allowed to get involved, but are actively encouraged to dive balls deep into the fracas and drag players away from the pile to the point where they get like slapped, backhanded, to be like, get the hell off me. I'm busy here, right? It's just this weird, like, Dom is essentially standing there with everybody else on the sideline and starts telling Dre Greenlaw not to be an asshole by body slamming a wide receiver, and gets, Greenlaw's hand pushed in his face. And apparently this is like egregious violation of protocol by Dom.
Once again, the crack research staff, Ben Stockwell, bringing even more evidence to light here about Dom's involvement in the game.
Yeah.
He caught a pass yesterday as well.
Caught a pass?
Yeah. Jalen Hurts rolling out second quarter along the sideline, throws it away, right to Dom's hands. It's unbelievable. Did this make the rounds on Twitter? Where'd you find this, Ben? Can we tweet this out? No, we're not allowed to, but what a beautiful catch by Dom. What a game for Dom. All right. We said we were going to finish by 9:30, and we're up against it.
Big game for Dom's profile.
Oh, yeah. Book deal incoming.
T-shirts.
A lot of good stuff here. But it's about the Niners, man. 42-19, dominant win, and they'll be number one in all the power rankings this week, I think. I think they're gonna overcome being a game behind the Eagles. But I'll say this, look, Eagles Cowboys in Dallas next week. This is huge for the Niners maybe having that home game.
Yeah.
In the playoffs if they
it's legit that when you think about, so if they went on a 3-game losing skid and that took them out of like everybody's power rankings, but those were 3 games where they were without 2 of their most important players, and when those guys have been in the lineup, whether it's as simple as Debo in equals greatness or whatever, when everybody's there, this team looks unstoppable.